So I started to meditate, and meditation is a tool that I've used all my life since I was a teenager and got interested in the martial arts. And during meditation, I could feel something that I had never felt before. I could feel my body and spirit separating.
Whoa.
So
Wow.
I knew that I was dying. And so I sent Joy a text.
Can I ask you a clarification question at this moment?
Of course. However you want to do it.
How do you describe that feeling? You said, I've never heard that sentence before, okay? I felt my body and soul separating. Is that what you said?
That's what I said. It's body and spirit, but same
Body
thing.
and spirit. So how do you describe that experience, that feeling?
I could feel a disconnection, that I was disidentifying with my body, that the essence that is us, that we all know isn't really the container, began to take on a separateness of observation and watching. Like I wasn't hovering above, I wasn't completely separated, but I could feel the process of disentanglement.
Most of us never learned how to train our brains, which is why most of us needlessly settle, struggle, and worse, suffer. My name is Chris Doris, and I want to make brain training mainstream. This is my series, Tough Talks, Conversations on Mental Toughness. I'm interviewing badasses from all walks of life on what mental toughness means to them and their unique approaches to strengthening their minds. What's happening, Tough Talks tribe members? Welcome back to the podcast, Tough Talks, Conversations on Mental Toughness, and I'm your host, Chris Doris. And in case, before we get to our guest today, who you are going to be blown away by, if you're not getting my daily dose mental toughness tips in 30 seconds or less, arriving in your inbox every single day of the year, around 6 a.m., wherever you are on the planet, and if you're not getting notified of my blog posts that go out every Tuesday, and if you're not getting notifications of these new podcasts, Tough Talks podcast episodes, then we can take care of all that with one quick keystroke. Well, a few. If you go to christopherdoris.com/lists, L-I-S-T-S, then you put your name, email, then click, and you get all the goodies. All right, you guys, our guest today, raise your hand if you've ever died. Yeah, me neither. He did. Our guest, Kellan Fluckiger. I think it's Nordic, his name. Yeah. This guy is fascinating. He died. That's only one of the many reasons that this guy's so fascinating. I met him through the coaching world. I don't know him well. I've only spoken to him prior to this once, right, to date. And I asked him to not tell me the details of these stories. This guy has stories, and he's got stories for days. And these are not normal stories. So there's one, at least one, that I really, really want to unpack with him, and it's that he died. And what little he told me about it, because I really did request, I don't want to hear a whole lot because you've got me so fascinated. I want it to be fresh. Like I want to be hearing it. I want to be experiencing this story for the first time with you. Right? And so here's my pledge to you is I'm gonna channel you guys, okay? And I'm gonna ask as many questions as is useful that I'm thinking you'd have for him. So I'm going to do my best on that. I anticipate that this is going to be a fascinating dialogue. That's not going out on a limb at all, right there. So let me read you his bio here. So Kellan Fluckiger, executive speaker, performer, and catalyst. He's a musician and a performer, singer. Coming through decades of depression, addictions, life-threatening illness, and a near-death experience, Kellan has become the ultimate catalyst to help motivated people melt barriers, move mountains, mobilize superpowers to achieve their true desires. As a coach and keynote speaker, Kellan's masterful approach helps people get past old stories, change beliefs, and create a life context to reach even goals that seemed impossible. So, without further ado, let's go find the man. Kellan's here. He's waiting for us. Let's go find him. Where are you, man? The man. Kellan Fluckiger.
Amazing. You said it right.
Dude, I've been practicing that for like a week.
And you win.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That was I don't normally get nervous before interviews, but I got to tell you a little nervousness about that. I feel very happy right now. Now I'm super calm that I crushed that. Devin Bandison says hello, by the way.
Hi, good. Hello, Devin. Great to see you. I saw your episode too. So wonderful. I really, really like Devin.
Yeah, well, he really likes you too. We were just talking about it. He was just here because he is, as we speak, in this moment in coaching session with his coach, the ultimate coach, Steve Hardison, who I know you know.
Of course.
Yep. So he just told me to give you a shout out, say hi.
Most excellent.
So you know what I would love? I'm sorry. What were you just about to say?
I was just going to say I feel helloed to.
You are helloed to. So
yeah.
That's a perfectly appropriate emotion for you to be experienced. I'm validating your helloed to-ness.
All right. I love it.
Yeah. So you know what I wanted to start talking about? Because you only told me a little bit about it, and I insisted that you don't tell me a lot about it because I wanted it to be super fresh for me today. It's that you died.
I did.
Yeah. I heard you died, and you're not dead anymore.
I'm not dead now. I was dead then. I am not dead today.
So is that a good place for us to start?
It's a perfect place to start.
Let's do it. Tell us what happened, man.
Well, so I am, all my life I've never been much in the way of doctors and hospitals and things, and don't go unless I really have to. I assume that I'll get better eventually on my own, and so I don't go do that. This particular thing, it was summer of 2018, 3 years ago, and Joy and I, neither one of us had ever been on a cruise. It just wasn't a thing that we'd planned to do. So we went on one, and it was a 10-day cruise in the Baltic Sea, which I vaguely knew where it was, but not very well. And it runs east and west. I didn't know that. So it runs east and west. And we stopped in, Helsinki and Tallinn, Estonia, and St. Petersburg, and, all the ports on the Baltic Sea, and Oslo. And we started in Amsterdam and then flew to, I think started in the water in Helsinki. But anyway, so at the end, it was over, and we were in Oslo for a couple of days. And the first day in Oslo, I started to feel bad. The second day in Oslo, I was really sick, and we were going to Amsterdam to come home. And so we did. We didn't really cut it short. We just went, but I was really getting a fever. And so that was Monday in Oslo, Tuesday in Amsterdam, and got home Tuesday afternoon. And one of the funny things about polar flights is that go to the west, you land about the same time you take off. So we took off at 3 p.m. and landed at 4, even though we'd been in the air for 9 hours. So that was a long flight. So I was sick Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, kept getting sicker. Sometimes it would get a little better, but just getting sick. Finally, Friday, I decided to go to the walk-in clinic here in Alberta, Edmonton. They had a sign in the clinic that said, if you have a bad cough, this is pre-COVID, right? It's 2018. If you have a bad cough or something, tell the nurse, as you come in or something right away. Just, I guess they want to either, I don't know. Never done it before. So I sent Joy in ahead of time to tell him. And the nurse came out into the parking lot. She took one look at me and said, "You can't come in here." She said, "We can't help you. Go to the emergency room right now."
Wow.
So I don't know what she saw, but it was awful because in the parking lot, that was the instruction. So we drove to the ER. Normally in typical emergency rooms, you might be there for an hour or two, depending on how many people are there, and they triage and look at you and all that stuff. In 10 minutes, I was in a private room, which I didn't even know they had private rooms in ER. Usually they're those little curtain. Yeah. Okay. Well, in 10 minutes, I was in a room with the door alone. The doctors came in very quickly. So I must have looked horrific. And so anyway, they started asking me questions, where I'd been, what was going on, how long I'd been sick. And I gave them the whole story, a little bit more than I gave you, but, describing my condition each of the 5 days. And that was at the end of the 5th day now, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday afternoon. So they came back very quickly and said, we're going to admit you in the hospital. There's no question. We're just not sure what's wrong with you. So then they'd come back every hour. We're looking for a bed. We're this, we're that. And after I finally sent Joy home, I said, I'm going to obviously be here for a while, so you might as well go home. We had dogs and cats and hadn't made any arrangements. So, off she went. And it was nighttime now. And they said, all right, we're taking you up to the 5th floor. Now, at a minimum, you have pneumonia in both lungs. Really, really, really bad. But some other stuff's wrong and we're not sure what it is. And they came back again, said, we're going to put you in intensive care. And then they came back again and said, we're going to put you in biological isolation, which is like, double doors, negative pressure.
That sounds bad.
Yeah. Airlock doors, right? 2 doors to get in and the whole 9 yards. So we're going to put you in bio-isolation. And then they finally came back. And this is now after midnight, and they were moving me. And the doctor said the question you never want to hear. He said, do we have permission to intubate you and do anything we need to do to preserve your life? And I said, what? Right. Okay. So now I'm in upstairs in a room, getting ready. I knew they were going to take me to the emergency, but anyway, so they said, we just need to prepare some things. So that each one of those took an hour or so. So I started to meditate, and meditation is a tool that I've used all my life since I was a teenager and got interested in the martial arts. And during meditation, I could feel something that I had never felt before. I could feel my body and spirit separating.
Whoa.
So
Wow.
I knew that I was dying. And so I sent Joy a text.
Can I ask you a clarification question at this moment?
Of course. However you want to do it.
How do you describe that feeling? You said, I've never heard that sentence before, okay? I felt my body and soul separating. Is that what you said?
That's what I said. It's body and spirit, but same
body
thing.
And spirit. So how do you describe that experience, that feeling?
I could feel a disconnection, that I was disidentifying with my body, that the essence that is us, that we all know isn't really the container, began to take on a separateness of observation and watching. Like I wasn't hovering above, I wasn't completely separated, but I could feel the process of disentanglement.
Oh, so that feeling, was that a physiological feeling, an emotional feeling, both?
It was not fearful. It was simply
not fearful.
No, it just was happening. And I noticed I am separating. The thing that is I is leaving this place.
Okay. Thank you.
I am separating from this body.
Okay.
So I grabbed my phone and I sent Joy a text. And by this time my decline was really precipitous. And so I couldn't operate the phone very well. And I sent her a 3-line text. And the first line was ICU. The second line was isolation/intubation. And the third line was, I may be dying.
Wow.
Goodness. And she didn't see it because she was asleep.
Mm-hmm.
And then in some minutes after that, I went into code red, green, blue, black, whatever it is in the hospital crash cart. So I was taken on a crash cart. I know this from discussions later because I lost consciousness and was gone. In a crash cart to the ICU, put in bio-isolation and tubed up and everything else. And then about 2:30 or 3, Joy got a call that you never want to get from the hospital. Phone rang and she answered it and she was asleep. She'd planned to come back in the morning. She knew I was going to get admitted, and we didn't realize when she left at all what was going on. And the nurse said to her, are you coming? And she said, what? And then she saw my text.
Wow.
It was like, holy crap. So then when she got down to the hospital, they told her that I was in ICU, that I was in a coma, that I was tubed up and everything. And she said nothing, even my text and everything the nurse told her, nothing prepared her for what she actually saw when she got there. I was unconscious, in a coma, restrained, strapped to a cart, They were pumping me full of, well, in case I involuntarily moved, I was so full of needles and tubes and
Okay.
like every way possible. They didn't know what was wrong with me. They knew I was dying. They knew it was insanely serious. I was just precipitously diving. And were filling me full of what they now call the antibiotic of last resort. They actually have an antibiotic that's named that, the antibiotic of last resort.
That's its name.
That's the name. I mean, it has a chemical name too. But anyway, so that and some other stuff. And during that time, my heart stopped and I was gone. And that's when my experiences dying started on the other side.
On the other side.
My spirit became aware. In other words, my spirit regained consciousness.
Oh, wow.
At that moment. So I became aware of my surroundings. It was not aware and did not appear like the hospital room my body was in. It rather appeared like a gray room. It was gray. I was horizontal, like I was on the bed. And then I looked around and I couldn't really see the walls. It was gray as far as I could see, but I could see over my left shoulder a doorway, and it had a door jamb. It even had like the sill. There was no door in it, but it was a doorway. And I had a desire to be at that door. And so then I found myself at the door and I was leaning on the door jamb on my right shoulder. And I noticed that on the other side of the door, it was white. My side of the door was gray and the other side was white. It wasn't streaming through like it was just white on that side and gray on my side. And then I noticed there was someone on the other side leaning on the door jamb on their right shoulder, right across, like the distance of a hand. And we stood there and then he looked at me and he said, "Do you want to come home?" And we talk as coaches, we use the word holding space in our profession as a conversational description of a place where it's safe to think, to be silent, to explore ideas, often in silence and so forth. My experience at that moment was several things. It was nothing like I had ever imagined it would be to meet God. The question and the context and the framing, there has never been any space holding like was happening at that moment. There was absolute peace, clarity, calm. There was no expectation about what the answer should be, but there was a question in the air and it needed an answer. I knew that. And there it was. And so I began thinking about and talking about what I was up to and joy and the plans that we had together. And 10 years before that, I'd had a divine intervention that had gotten me sober in 2008 from my long history of addictions. And that was different. But that had caused me to embark on the mission that had created my coaching practice and everything else. So I was talking about that and about joy and about stuff we had planned to do and about whether or not she was, if things were organized financially for her and just all the things that would go through your mind. And we chatted about that for a while, again, in the context of zero expectation. Thought about what would happen if I said yes. And I had no doubts that there would be a way provided for Joy to be able to be okay and take care of herself and do things. So there was no fear involved in any of the considerations, zero. It was just, these will be the things. Finally, after I considered it for some period of time, I just looked at him and I said, "I'm not done." Okay. And that was the end of that first conversation.
Okay, can I ask a couple questions here?
Yeah, by all means.
What is the emotion that you're experiencing right now as you're describing this experience?
Every time I tell this story or talk about it or think about it deeply, I'm filled with reverence, unspeakable gratitude, the awareness of power and love. And I chafe a little at my inability to find the articulation.
Oh, you're very good at articulating.
To describe what was happening. We just don't have the words.
Wow.
To be, to be there, to know in a heartbeat, like you just know things in a flash. I knew who I was talking to, where I was, what the question meant. None of that was even said, but you just know. You know things. So when I said, not done, and he said, okay, I'm sure it was at that moment that they were able to restart my heart, because the decision had been made. It wasn't theirs to do, it was mine. So that was the first of 3 conversations. And there aren't any words, Chris. I've written the book, Meeting God at the Door, Conversations, Choices, and Commitments of a Near-Death Experience, trying to describe, and even in writing that and trying to be open and clear and withhold nothing, I just, a few weeks ago, I just did the Audible. I don't even think it's up yet. So I reread my own book, and for the Audible. And even in reliving that through reading it and being reconnected viscerally, just, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks ago, with that, we don't have the words, because as I read the words and as I describe it to you, my essence, my spirit is filled with a recollection of sights and feelings that we don't have words for: peace, power, infinite capability, stuff that's just beyond our ability to understand, that is so richly textured and nuanced and deep and powerful, that is, but the simple thing was, you want to come home? I'm not done.
Okay, I don't know how to follow that up. I'm searching for a question. I should have one, but I don't know if I do, man. That's like, okay, what next?
So what happened next is the next day, and I don't know how I knew it was the next day. I'm sure it was after my heart was restarted. I was allowed spiritually to be in the same place. So I was back at the same door, visiting with the same person, and with conversation number 2. And there were 3. So conversation number 2, what was noticeable, one of the things I'd always thought, I was raised in a very religious / fanatic / violent upbringing, where everything was enforced with stuff that was discipline then, but today would be cause to remove kids from the home, felony child abuse kind of stuff. Wow. So I internalized the sense that I wasn't good enough, and that everything that I did all my life was wrong, bad, that I'd never measure up, that every bad thing that was going on around me was my fault. And I had started with what turned out to be MDD, major depressive disorder, in my early teens. And I'd carried that from 13 to 53, so about 40 years, never talking to anyone, because I was convinced that it was me that was bad, and if I just sucked it up and was a better person, I would be okay. In that context, I was always trying to prove that I was okay, so I made heroic attempts at proving myself, and in that way I got big jobs and a lot of money and all this other stuff, but underneath was this constant rumbling drumbeat of not enough, never okay. So my expectation at meeting the God that I had assumed existed was terrifying. that I would be found wanting no matter what I'd done, that I was not okay, that the judgments that had been passed on me by my mother was the principal disciplinarian. And I'll tell you a funny story. You think, well, when you're a teenager, like, you're bigger than your mom and all that stuff. My mother was so impressively powerful in her presence that the teenage boys in the neighborhood were scared to death of her.
Wow.
She would walk out and tell them, 14, 15, 16-year-old, go do this, go do that, go pick up. And they would simply do it.
Wow.
Nobody ever said, screw you, lady, and walk. None of that. Zero, none.
Wow.
So when I describe that, I was terrified. I was wrong. I was bad. And I lived with that my whole life. So I imagined meeting God would be awful. And the reason I say all this is because the thing that was most notable, or not most, one of the more notable things was the absence of all that. The entire interviews, all three of them, were conducted in the most open, kind, loving, opportunistic, beautiful, peaceful, calm, expectation rich, and judgment absent space that can be imagined or conceived. And I didn't even think about it until later. And then it was just so noticeable by its absence. None of that was there. So when I showed up for the second conversation, the topic of the day before wasn't even brought up. That was decided. So then the questions were, okay, you're staying. So what are you going to do? You said you're not done. What are you going to do? And so I reviewed my clients, my coaching practice, my relationship with Joy, and her presence in my life followed the miracle 10 years before. That's all written about in Tightrope of Depression, and we might get to some of that later. The story of how Joy came in my life is both funny and impossible, but that's not this story.
Maybe that'll be episode 2.
It could be. Anyway, so what are you going to do? So I talked about what I was doing and what I was trying to do and the message that I was carrying into the world from my own experience and coaching, practice, and work. And in the course of that conversation about our opportunity as humans and as divine beings, 4 things became really clear to me.
Okay.
And the 4 things that became really clear were these 4. Number 1, every single one of us is a divine and intentional creation, period. No question, no maybe, no, well, could be, not, I think so. We are intentional divine creation from the almighty source. Okay. Number 2, every single one of us is given gifts and talents intentionally that are ours, thoughtfully, carefully, intentionally given. Number 3, that every single one of us has assignments, an arc of assignment opportunity that is part of our life experience that we were not only excited, we agreed to, and we were excited about before we came. We knew, we understood, we agreed, and we were stoked about coming here with the opportunities to do these things. And number 4, that all the help we need to do those things is available from both sides of that door. Those 4 things were absolutely clear. And I don't know, those of your listeners that have seen the old Jodie Foster movie, First Contact.
Contact. Contact's one of my favorite movies. It might be my favorite movie of all time by Carl Sagan.
Where they build that thing and it falls.
Yep. It goes, and then the alien intelligence comes back in the form of as her dad and says, we've been studying you forever.
I don't know. I don't remember that part. They dropped a ball through this.
And that was the beach scene where she was wherever the hell that was on some beach. It was
12
actually
seconds
Florida.
of video was missing. And all right. So that during her time there, it showed all this intense stuff. And it reminded me of the old Maxell tape commercial where the guy's sitting in a chair, his hair's blowing back, from the sound. That experience was real. I felt like if I had not been in a protective bubble, I would have been instantly incinerated, that I was both empowered and blessed with the opportunity to witness and receive fire hose equivalent of stuff. And I felt like kind of like that this whole time, as these principles and truths were outlined and explained and so forth. And so that went on for some undetermined period.
What did it seem like as far as time passage? Like, how long did it?
Well, it felt like these conversations were one this day and one that day and one the third day. That's what they were. So it was some subset of a day. I'll be honest, how long it was going on was the last thing in the universe I was thinking about. Like, who cares? I don't know. But I felt like both that it was a period of time, like it was accelerated beyond my ability to articulate. And I just felt like that kind of experience being poured into me and coming out and articulated simply in those 4 principles. When we got done with that, I felt like I said, okay. And you might say the sentence, well, if that's true, then you'd ask a question, right? In that setting, you don't use the word if. I said, since that's true, why do we settle for crumbs?
You said crumbs. Why do we settle for crumbs?
Why do we settle? Like, those 4 things were the most awesome, liberating, empowering things you can possibly imagine. Since that's true, why do we settle for crumbs? By and large, like all of us, like what's the deal? And I don't know if in the economy of heaven, brevity is a virtue, but the answer was 4 words. Because you don't believe. Like, straight up, because you don't believe. And that answer hit me like I was hyperventilating almost. Okay, like, what am I? I'm staying. I'm doing this coaching work, helping people. These 4 things have been not only revealed, but demonstrated in ways I can't describe. And you've told me why we settle for crumbs. And I'm not sure why I picked those words in the question, but I did. Why do we settle for crumbs? Because you don't believe. And I said, all right, what am I going to do? What can I do about that in my ongoing process? And again, the answer is, oh, glad you asked.
I thought you might.
And so what followed then was a framework for changing belief that doesn't involve fighting, white knuckling, arguing, screaming, or any of that stuff, which came to me with a name. It's called the Context Formula for Context. So I wrote a companion book to Meeting God at the Door called The Book of Context. And it outlines this formula. And when I wrote that book, I had a client who was a retired physician in Baltimore, read it and write the foreword. And it was hysterical because he read it, loved it, said some nice things about it. And then he spent an hour trying to convince me that the name needed to be changed. He said, if you'd written the Book of Joy or the Book of Love, we would understand it at looking at that. But the Book of Context? And I waited till he was all done explaining. And I said, Mort, the name's not negotiable. Like, it's just not negotiable. And he said,
Right. Like, leave it alone.
like, I get it. Okay. So that the second conversation was by far the longest. It was the intense experience of learning. It was the framework that I've, done the best that I could do with in the book of context. And that conversation ended. I was really excited then. I felt vibrating. We talk about energy and vibrations and stuff. My soul, my beingness felt vibrating. I was vibrating with, and I was repeating in my mind over and over again the context framework and the things that I wanted to remember to make sure that I didn't forget them. And again, I had no idea what was going on outside, but this was just the essence. So I was repeating these things over and over again. And the third day, the last conversation was, again, just one question. I came back, was back at the door, and I was vibrating and excited. This time I was excited. I was, just feeling really vibrant and excited about everything. And there we were, and that was silence. And then he looked at me, and there was just one question again. And the question was, "Are you sure?" And it hit me like a freight train. And I thought, what do you mean, am I sure?
Yeah.
Am I stupid? Am I overlooking something? Am I biting off?
Did I pick the wrong answer?
Yeah, exactly. I'm dead.
Right. I meant yes. Wait. No, wait.
And so I thought about everything I could think about. Am I biting off more than I can chew? Am I missing something here? Am I in over my head? Like, what? What do you mean, am I sure? Like, I've just had these, and so finally, I calmed down. I went through all of the things that I could consider. And finally, I said, yes, I'm sure. And the conversation ended. Nothing was said, but it ended with a finality that I knew, like anything else, that we were done. And then some 2.5 weeks later, I woke up out of the coma.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. When you were in the coma for 2.5 weeks after they restarted your heart, after you said, I'm not done, right? After the first conversation.
I went into the hospital. I went to the coma and crashed card on June 9th. I died on June 9th. I came out of the coma on June 26th or 5th.
Was there any commentary by any of the medical professionals that were observing you about any kind of physiological changes or observable phenomena that was going on while you were in the coma?
I don't know. When I came out of the coma, all I could do was talk about context. And so I was prattling on about what I'd seen and about what I was learning and about context. And I was incoherent because I, was drugged up and everything else. So I thought for sure that I would be sort of, just some incoherent babbler. And I was talking about what I'd seen and what had happened.
To whom? Who were you talking to this about?
Staff, nurses, doctors, anybody, everybody in the room.
Did they listen?
Yeah.
Did they care?
I expected not, but the experiences of the next month and then 6 months later told me differently.
Okay.
Yeah. So I told Joy all about it, and Joy and I have both had experiences where she knows the truth of what I've said, and also that one of her agreed assignments when she came was this. And the decades that I spent in depression and the things that I burned through in relationships and should easily have killed a person 2, 3, 4, 10 times and left them useless and burned out. That was not the plan. And what Joy told me later, when she saw my message at 3 a.m, she saw my message, I might be maybe dying. And the nurse said, "Are you coming?" And she told me what she said out loud was, "Not on my watch." Right? She spent more time at the hospital than I even know, monitoring things, pestering staff, telling him when my leg was hot and my blood pressure was wrong, and pounding and hounding and getting explanations and going after him, and on and on and on. Tireless and invincible. And I had no idea. When I finally came out of the coma, I was hot all the time. And that would have been because of the infections and the things that were gradually subsiding. And I asked for ice a lot. And I had no idea until later the drama that it was just to get in and out of the room that I was in. You had to suit up, and there were airlock doors, and you know what I mean? And so it was an ordeal to get in and out of there. And I didn't know that until later. When I finally found out was the first time I had to go through those doors. So the emotion that you see in me as I describe these things and relive these experiences is important, not just because there's no sadness here. It's a confirmation, an absolute declaration of the truth that underlies the mission that I agreed to when I said I'm not done. And so when I say to people, I only do one thing.
Yeah, right.
They have no idea what I'm talking about.
Well,
And the answer is, I only do one thing.
It's on my list.
That's it.
Okay. So
From
how do
morning-
you, so when I mean, can I ask?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what is it?
From the minute I wake up in the morning, I've trained my mind. So I'm going to say a bunch of stuff. People are going to either think it's crazy or whatever, and I really don't care. I've trained my mind. So from the moment I open my eyes, my lips are speaking gratitude and connection with the divine. I enter the spirit, the space of spirit, the moment my eyes open. I live in there and I seek power, the power that comes from only that place. And I seek it with the idea of, who am I talking to today? What am I doing? How can I help someone understand those 4 truths? Who you are and what you are capable of. That's it. From the minute my eyes open until the minute they close, I don't do anything else. The books that I write, the seminars I teach, the music that I write that tells the stories, I was taking care of Joy's mom. Every single thing that I do, from sunup to sundown, from eyes open and even sometimes asleep, my meditation and prayer going to sleep is that my spirit, while my body rests, will enter that realm of spirit and be taught and be empowered and enlightened more to do that one thing, which is affect as many people as I possibly can to understand who they are and what they can have and do and be.
I love how beautifully emotional you are about this and how incredibly passionate and transparent. Are you a fan by any chance of Alan Watts?
I've seen some of his. Absolutely.
You're
I wouldn't
reminding
be a
me.
fanatic or anything, but I certainly have done stuff.
So one of my favorite quotes of all time is from him. They said, each of us is an aperture through which the universe, God, observes itself. Only the game that we're playing is to not know that. Right? And he talks about the ultimate game of hide and seek. We hide ourselves to find ourselves. And that's what you're reminding me of right now. That we are all expressions of divine grace in human form.
That's something you said the other day. We are in that place, and from the place of being divine grace in human form, it gives absolute embodiment and truth to the things that get bandied about, which is you can create whatever you want, or you're the architect of your life. One of the things in my personal truth, I call it a PTAC, personal truth and commitment statement, is a statement, several down, that says, I am at cause. I create my spirit, my body, my feelings, my thoughts, and circumstance. And that's part of the daily preparation. I am about creating that today. And I create it in service of the message. What does God look like, by the way? Look like a person. It was in the shape of a person. It was a person standing there, and we were having a conversation. You know, if you're going to ask me if he was a long-bearded white dude, the answer is I have no idea. That wasn't the thing. The whiteness was overshadowing that. And by whiteness, I don't mean whiteness in the way we talk about it. Yeah. I mean energy, power, glory, gentleness. It was not an off-putting, blinding whiteness. It was an inviting, enveloping kindness, a power of invitation, of opportunity, of love, incomprehensibly encompassing.
Have you ever heard? So, I mean, like, you're one of the few people that have had, I don't know, what do you call this event? What do you refer to it? I mean, because people call it a near-death experience. What do you call it?
I call it that just because that's the common terminology.
Called dead. Right. And it's obviously an indescribably beautiful experience. Is that accurate? I don't want to put any words in your mouth.
No, it is. I mean, okay. I can't. I've done the best I can to describe it in the book. The power is infinite. The words are lacking. It bears witness to the truth of all of our connectedness and divinity at the same time.
So, did you ever get interested in studying other people's experiences who have died?
I've read a few of the books. I have not developed a fascination. I don't run around doing, NDE explanations or conferences, because here's the way I think about that.
Yeah.
I do not know and cannot know what God has done in their connection and relationship with anybody else. I don't know that, and I'm not pretending that I know that. So I neither judge nor discount. If someone says they've had an experience, I accept it for what they tell me, and they tell me what they feel and see and know and do, and I go from there. I mean, people, I don't know. How would I know what the divine has done in the relationship and development of anyone else? I don't.
Have you ever heard anyone who has had a near-death experience describe it as unpleasant?
I'm not acquainted with anyone that has described that. Maybe there is, but I don't know anyone personally.
So, the question is, why do we forget? Why don't wait? So sorry. Let me go to another question, which is, okay. So you asked the divine in conversation number 2, why do we settle for crumbs? The answer was 4 words: because you don't believe. So why don't we believe? Like, is that the human experience, or what's up with that?
Yeah. I mean, we were born somehow forgetting everything we knew before. We all have the innate sense that we came from somewhere, but we don't remember that. So that's obviously by design. So there's some design elements here. 1, we don't remember that. 2, we're allowed to glimpse it, to feel it, to connect with it occasionally. And according to what rules, I don't know. But what I do know is that the rules are designed for our benefit and growth. They're not designed to tease, to play games, or to be silly. They're designed for our benefit and growth. And if I go at them wondering why my playbook isn't the way God operates, then I'm missing the point that the creation process was designed for our growth and development and ultimately our happiness. And when I get frustrated and scream at God and say, why is this or that happening, or why did this or that happening, or why did you let this or that or whatever, it's with a riveting fascination on my own playbook for life, which I have now discarded, but without realizing that the playbook that matters is the one that's far bigger and longer term than this molecularly infinitesimal experience of 100 years.
So you had a concert the other day.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the many cool things that you do. You have concerts, you do concerts, you perform. And it was a digital concert. and there was an unusual event that occurred.
Yeah.
That I think that, which I'll ask you to describe if you're cool with that.
Yeah, you bet.
That I think most people would very committedly describe as totally unpleasant, like uncool. What happened?
Well, so in part of the things that happened from 2008, when I was transformed from a high-ranking executive making too much money and a drug addict that was using $3,000 a week in cocaine, to a sober person who walked away from all that and got sober in one day, like threw it away, and that was the end. That was a different experience. But I started deciding that it was time to get help. So I walked away from all those contracts. I walked away from other job offers that came, knowing that I had been invited, and that was nowhere near as much fun as this experience. That was not, it was different. But anyway, so I started writing books, and I wrote a book called Tightrope of Depression, my journey from darkness, despair, and death to light, love, and life. And it's a story of myself and this 40 years. And I told the experience that happened in that. But the experience, while it got me sober, didn't have anything to do with getting me clear of depression and the self-devaluation and everything. So I got sober, but that had nothing to do with the process that still had to happen to change how I viewed myself, my life, what I was worth, what I was capable of, where I got my validation and valuation and all that. That was a long, ongoing process. So anyway, I wrote that book, and then I hadn't intended to write any more, but it turned out that it's going to be a trilogy. Volume 2 is done now. It's called Down from the Gallows. When I got done with the first book, I decided that because I'm a musician and I owned a recording studio forever, that in addition to writing book was, everybody writes books, I should write some music. So I wrote an album of songs that told the stories, some of the stories from the book. And the name of that album that goes with Tightrope is called Name of the Black. And the reason it has that title is there's a particular reason. I'll tell that story in a minute. But then I wrote the companion volume, the second volume 2 of the trilogy. When I got done with the first book, then it became obvious the story wasn't done, even though I had never intended to write any more. I was just telling the story, partly therapeutically and partly because I hoped it would help people. But anyway, so then I wrote volume 2 and decided I'm going to do an album of music with that too. And that album is called Promise and Power. So there were 11 songs on the one and 11 on the other. And the songs on Name of the Black are painful, sad, hard, bitter, vulnerable, deep. And the ones on Promise and Power are about recovery and growth and discovery and change and rescue and that good stuff. So the concerts that I'm doing some more, is to do 3 songs off of each album, 6 songs, and tell the stories that go with the songs. So tell the story about song, and then with some explanation about the series up front, and then a song, stories and songs, story and song. To do 6 of them, that takes about an hour. So we'd plan for about an hour to do 6 songs and stories and talk about it. So we were about a little over a third, not quite halfway through the concert. And then suddenly, without any warning, what I have termed a denial of service attack, which is when hackers like attack a bank and they flood it with requests for service so much that the servers are overwhelmed. I'd never heard of this happening on Zoom. But what happened was suddenly, even though we had the settings correct, we have to let each person in. Somehow the hack was able to get around that, and windows like they do in Zoom just started appearing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They just started appearing, and they never had people in them. They were like camera turned off things. They had one name. They all appeared to be, Carlos Maria Hispanic type names, although I certainly didn't see them all the ones that I was able to see. But many of them, not just black with a name, had images. A lot of them were like video images. So it was violence and mocking and television snow and colors. And some of them were porn, like just offensive stuff. And then there was that guy from the V movie, his face, the white mask face, and just an assortment. And they were coming fast. And the soundtrack that was with them were screaming loud. It's like way loud. So completely overpowered the volume of the system. We couldn't mute them or delete them fast enough because they just kept coming and coming and coming. And Joy was over there panicking. She said her heart rate went through the roof. She was running the computer off to the side, and I was sitting in front of a keyboard with a microphone and cameras talking to the audience and performing. And so I remained absolutely unflustered. I simply said, well, I'm sorry, this is not what we intended. Let me see what we can do. Joy, can you delete those? I'm trying. And so after it became clear they were coming faster than she could delete them, I said, let me see if I can help. And I got up and walked over to her, and it became clear in about 5 minutes that we couldn't rescue it. So I just said, we're going to close the room and we'll start again. I don't know if anybody could hear because the noise of the offending things were so loud. So we just closed the room, and I talked to Joy for a minute, and I said, let's just create another room and we'll send it out to as many individuals as we can remember and look at the list of people that registered and send them Facebook messages or whatever. So we did, and some people came back, and we finished the concert, and I just went ahead and finished it up. And I said, we'll do it again. And we'll probably use a different platform. There's other performing platforms, Stage It and Indie Pro and some other ones, and not use Zoom again. But anyway, so that's what happened.
Thank you. As you tell that story, what is the emotion that you're experiencing right now?
I'm just narrating. At the time, and a little bit now, I felt sad. Not sad because I didn't get to do my stuff, and felt a little bit sad because we had a sponsor, the lady that sponsored it, and there was a donation opportunity for her stuff. The concert, there was no charge for it. And it was all designed to spread the message that we've talked about and help those who want to end addiction to mediocrity. Like, I don't really focus on addictions per se, but addiction to mediocrity, which is we settle for crumbs, that, right? And so I felt sad. I felt really sad for the person that felt like, what is happening in the settling for crumbs life of this person that is so painful that this is the expression of their gift.
They seem to have forgotten their assignment that they agreed to, right?
Yeah. So I felt sad. And, the answer is in a few weeks, we'll figure out the right platform and we'll keep going. I mean, nothing's going to change the message. Nothing's going to change what we're doing. And if that is a direct and clear attack, then it is okay. And we're going to come back and keep going.
Yeah. Cool, man. Where can people learn about these concerts?
So I talk about them on my Facebook wall when they're coming up. We had been establishing an Eventbrite link. We may do it through another venue. I reach out to people individually and also in groups that I belong to with permission from the moderators, and just let them know what we're doing and tell a little bit of the story of how they came to be. So I don't have a marketing platform. When I have a sponsor, like they reach out to their people just because it's going to be in support of whoever that is.
Yeah. Well, we've got all your links where people can connect with you through social media in the show notes. If you're down, man, I certainly would love to have another episode with you for this podcast and to talk about your wife Joy and how impossibly you came together, and I'm also really fascinated in how you sobered up from a $3,000 a week cocaine addiction in one day. Yeah, that got my attention too. So maybe you're a remarkably fascinating human. And I gotta tell you, I didn't anticipate, like, you and I don't know each other all that well. We've known of each other. We've had one conversation prior to this, which was awesome, by the way. I've watched a bunch of your or I've listened to, because I've listened to your podcast episodes, and I love the shout out. I love the shout out in number 466, because I think I was wearing this shirt when we met.
We were best damn day of my life.
And you mentioned that, so I love that. You're really fun to listen to. You're so incredibly articulate and fascinating. And what I didn't expect today was your level of emotion. And I'm so happy that was part of our experience with you. I cannot believe, I'll delete that. I totally believe it makes perfect sense that you referenced my favorite movie of all time. The emotional experience that I had watching the movie Contact, that particular scene where Jodie Foster's character had contact with intelligence that apparently was far more evolved than humans, that had sadness for us because we settle for goddamn crumbs. And my emotional experience when I watched that movie is hopefully similar to the emotion that you experienced today during this interview, because it was like of a remembrance, like don't have to suffer so damn much, don't have to struggle so much, don't even need to settle so much, and it's like so I got weepy today. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. And the most important thing is those things are true. The sadness and why do we do that? All true. But the polar opposite is the core important thing. Like, joy is a choice. You can live. One of the core messages on Your Ultimate Life podcast is you can have your ultimate life today, here, now. Life of purpose, prosperity, and joy is available now, not when X. X has nothing to do with it. You can have it today and nobody can take it away from you. It is yours to design and to create, period. And that uplifting, reaching message, scream, shout, sing, plead, love its way into the hearts of those who feel it and then are caught up in that web of belief that says somebody somewhere, but not me, not now, not here, first this, first that, which is not true. It is a limiting, I call it a context straitjacket. We live in this web of beliefs that is a context straitjacket. When I first talked about this, it was at ACS. Steve asked me to speak at ACS in October when I got out of the hospital.
So for those who don't know, Kellan is referring to Steve Chandler's coaching school. It doesn't exist anymore. Advanced Client Systems. And when I attended it, it was prior to that, it was called something else. It was called the Coaching Prosperity School. But that's what Kellan's referring to, just in case the folks listening aren't clear on that.
So I had been a member of that. I went for some years, and how I joined them was kind of fun too. It was not through reading anything. It was because I interviewed several of the people that were in it for another book that I'm writing that still isn't finished, because it's one of the 6 that I'm working on now, called Break the Cage. And I had the opportunity to interview several of them, and I saw, hey, they're all in this group. Hey, Chandler's running this group. And I had met Steve another way. And so I knew that he's running this group. Hey, there's a bunch of cool people. I should do that. So that's how I ended up in ACS. Anyway, the format of that is 3 meetings and 3-day meetings. And so I had missed one of them. I had gone to one and missed the second one because I was dying. It had happened during my stay in the hospital. The third one for that year was in October. And by then, when I got done, I'd lost 35 pounds. I looked like a survivor of a concentration camp. I could barely walk and everything. But by the time October got there, I could, I'd regained my ability to walk and do some stuff. So anyway, I went to that one and I spoke for a little while, and someone for an hour plus, and someone asked me a couple of questions at the end. I had, Q&A, and 2 questions stuck out in my mind. One was, what is the biggest impact this has had on you? And I hadn't prepared for any questions. And while I started thinking about it, I heard my mouth open and say, I no longer experience fear. And then the second thing is, when I see people, I don't see them as I used to. I see people in their context straitjacket. And I understand that it's transparent and flexible. And I have this yearning to help them understand that it's just a straitjacket in their minds.
My friend, I want to say thank you for the way that, you are an angel, man.
Joy is an angel. I'm just a regular guy, and there's nothing special about me. And every single thing that I have described is available to every single person who listens to your effort, and your desire and effort to add good to the world is what we are called to do, period.
Amen. Boom. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I can. Are we cool with scheduling up an episode 2 at some point in the
Of course.
future? Roger that. Kellan, I really appreciate you, man.
Thank you. Grateful to be here, and thanks for this space in which we could do this thing.
Yeah. So I'll put it in this. Of course. This thing. This thing. So. Of course, it'll be in the show notes, but for those of the Tough Talks tribe who prefer to listen and may not see the notes, your website is your name.
It is, and I have to add a letter because what you have written on the whiteboard is missing a letter.
Oh, I see it. I'll fix it. Don't even.
So just in case they looked at that and thought that was it. Yeah, Fluckiger. And that's why it's so scary for people to pronounce, is because it has, I was a keynote speaker at an event once for 3 days, and the guy putting on the event was a friend of mine, and he left the L out of my last name on the program. So for 3 days, he apologized. In 3 days, I got to make it.
Since I left out a letter, I'm happy that it wasn't the L.
Yeah.
If you're going to leave a letter out, don't leave the L out.
Well, he did.
So it's spelled, for those that are listening, Kellan, Kellan, Fluckiger, FLUCKIGER.com. And you're active on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn. And people can, and you've written 13 books, and you're literally working on 6 of more now.
I am, once titled Forgiveness, A Journey of Courage to a Place of Peace and Power. Once titled Failure, The Art and Science of Challenging Boundaries. One is the volume 3 of the Tightrope series, and that name I will not reveal. And
until when?
It's coming out next year, and there will be a companion album of music with that one, but it will be the conclusion of the trilogy, which I only intended to be one book, but turned into a trilogy.
Do you still require sleep?
I told you what happens when I sleep. I go places.
That's true. I'm just saying because, man, I mean, whew, you and Chandler, all you do is create. Thanks again, brother.
Thanks, buddy.
All right. Talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Wow. How beautiful is that guy? Wow. I really didn't expect, like I said at the end, you know, I only had one conversation with him before, and it was really fun and playful, and he's really funny. I could tell the guy is just like one of the most articulate people I'd ever met. I love that. I'm so impressed. I've always been so like totally impressed by people who just command language like him and Walt Hampton. I just introduced those guys in an email afterwards. But yeah, wow. So this is my favorite takeaway. I can't even say it's one of my favorite takeaways. I've got 5, 6, 10 pages of notes over here. You saw me scribbling, trying to capture it all. I definitely can't wait to re-listen to this and slow it down. But from the second conversation he had, right, with the Creator, with God, the 4 principles. 1, we are all intentional divine creatures. And isn't it just so spectacular, the emotion with which he shared all this? The whole time the dude was like, you know, tearing up the whole time, and no fear in that. That is spectacular. 2nd, we are all given gifts and talents purposefully. 3rd, we all have assignments that we were enthusiastically stoked about and agreed to prior to coming here. And the last, and all we would ever need in order to fulfill them is already here. That's good news. The ultimate game of hide and seek. We hide ourselves, so we find ourselves. Yeah, that's just spectacular. Absolutely beautiful. I feel so good right now. It's like I have the feeling right now, the feeling that is like when you're reminded that something that you may have been concerned or worried about is a non-issue, and you go, good. All right, Kellan Fluckiger. Don't leave out the L. Fluckiger, KellanFluckiger.com. Check out his workshops. His podcast is awesome. His podcast is awesome because all of the episodes are between like 15 and 20 minutes. All of them. He's got almost 500 of them. So that's pretty cool. Oh, and his podcast, by the way, if you're listening and not seeing the show notes, is called Your Ultimate Life with Kellan Fluckiger. All right, guys. Until next time, create miracles.